The Magician in Tarot, Carl Jung's hidden key to reality. Every journey begins with a step into the unknown, and that's exactly where the Fool comes in. He's the wild card of the psyche, that spark of curiosity and divine madness that pushes us to leap before we look. He doesn't calculate. He feels. He's not lost. He's just not attached to maps. The Fool lives in direct contact with the unconscious, with that dreamlike state before form, before identity. You've seen it in people who quit jobs overnight to travel the world, or kids who create entire universes from cardboard boxes. That's not recklessness, it's the raw pulse of inner potential awakening. Then, just a few steps ahead, stands the Magician. He's no longer floating, he's grounded, intentional. One hand points to the sky, the other to the earth. He knows the language of symbols and how to bend perception to will. Where the Fool trusts the process blindly, the Magician directs it. Think of inventors like Tesla or Da Vinci, dreamers who mastered form. The Magician represents that moment when you realize, wait, I can shape this reality. I'm not just living in it, I'm part of its design. Suddenly, spontaneity transforms into alchemy. These two archetypes dance within us constantly. The Fool asks, why not? The Magician replies, watch this. One leaps, the other lands. The Fool activates imagination, while the Magician channels it into creation. Their interaction is essential for psychological evolution. Without the Fool, the Magician becomes rigid and ego-driven. Without the Magician, the Fool dissolves into chaos. Together, they bridge unconscious impulse with conscious transformation. It's the psyche learning to dream awake. Tarot, then, isn't just divination, it's a mirror. Jung knew that. He saw the Fool and the Magician as archetypes not bound to cards, but alive in us. They echo ancient symbols that bypass logic and speak straight to the soul. When someone pulls these cards, they're not predicting, they're recognizing. A moment of synchronicity, where the outer image matches the inner state. The Fool stirs a calling. The Magician whispers, you already have the tools. It's not magic tricks, it's metaphysical truth. So, how do you work with these two? Start by noticing your Fool moments, those gut feelings, spontaneous urges, wild dreams. Honor them. Don't rush to explain or tame them. Then call in your inner Magician. Journal, draw, speak, create something from the madness. The trick is not to silence the chaos, but to give it form. And once you've started doing that, well, you're already stepping into something much deeper, because illusion and revelation often arrive in the same costume. Magic as illusion and revelation. Magic isn't just pulling rabbits from hats or whispering spells in candlelit rooms. It's perception management. It's what happens when the psyche bends reality and calls it ordinary. The Magician archetype doesn't just deal in tricks. He reveals that life itself is a kind of illusion, a dream shaped by consciousness. Yet, here's the twist. Illusion doesn't mean falsehood. It means a reality filtered through belief, perception, and story. That's why a simple coincidence can feel like fate, and a dream can shift your entire worldview overnight. The Magician knows how to play with these veils. He doesn't destroy the illusion, he uses it. In that sense, he's both a deceiver and a revealer, like Hermes slipping between dimensions with a wink. He shows you the world isn't fixed. One minute you're stuck in traffic, and the next you're having a cosmic realization listening to an old song. That's not random, it's alchemy. It's energy responding to attention, like a mirror waiting for you to notice your own face in it. Think about how easily we're swayed by symbols, brands, flags, even a tone of voice. The Magician taps into this field, shaping the material world through unseen forces. It's not hocus pocus. It's psychology, energy, and synchronicity wrapped in metaphor. And here's where the revelation kicks in. When you realize the power wasn't in the trick, but in the shift of consciousness it triggered. That goosebump moment? That's spirit nudging perception through the curtain of Maya. Now, when you encounter tarot, you're not just looking at cards, you're entering a dialogue with your own psyche. The Fool might appear to shake you out of stagnation. The Magician might show up when it's time to act, to manifest. These images speak in symbols, bypassing the rational mind to awaken the deeper layers. They don't tell you the future, they reflect the now so sharply, it reveals what's been hidden in plain sight. That's the magician's sleight of hand, truth disguised as a riddle. If you want to see this magic in action, watch how your thoughts affect your day. Try this before an important meeting. Visualize it going exactly how you want. Imagine the energy, the flow, the tone. Then walk in with that vibration. Notice the difference. That's your inner magician shaping perception, playing with reality, not by force, but by resonance. And if you think that's impressive, wait until you start noticing the patterns across your life. Because symbols, they never lie. They just wait to be seen. Symbolism in the Marseille and Waite tarot decks. Tarot isn't just a deck of cards, it's a visual language of the psyche. And when we compare decks like the Marseille and the Waitesmith, we're not just comparing styles, we're decoding symbolic dialects. The Marseille deck speaks in riddles, inviting the unconscious to wander. It's less about clarity and more about resonance. In contrast, the Waite deck, with its ornate imagery and structured symbolism, feels like a storybook. It offers clues, keys, and a clear archetypal map for those ready to interpret. Look closely at the magician in each version. In Waite's deck, the lemniscate floats like a halo, an eternal reminder of infinite energy looping above the brow. His tools are laid out obvious: wand, cup, sword, pentacle. He's a conscious creator, poised and in control. But Marseille, the symbols are less direct, more open to interpretation. The gesture of the hand, the crooked table, the ambiguous objects, they tease rather than declare. This ambiguity leaves space for projection, which is exactly what Jung would celebrate. Colors matter too. Waite's red roses and white lilies aren't random. They're alchemical, masculine and feminine, desire and purity. They speak of duality and union. The Marseille palette, on the other hand, feels older, earthier, less polished, more raw. It holds the energy of folk tradition, not scholarly revision. One invites structure, the other surrender. Neither is superior. Each one touches a different frequency in the unconscious, depending on what you're ready to see or avoid. Posture says a lot. Waite's magician is upright, balanced, a master of his domain. Marseille's figure leans slightly, almost mischievously. Is he bluffing? Is he enlightened? The ambiguity pulls you in, forces reflection. Is this man a teacher or a trickster? That's the power of symbolism. It activates the imagination, bypassing logic. It whispers to your inner self in dreams and images. That's why the Marseille deck, though older, still feels alive. It doesn't explain, it evokes. So when choosing a deck, ask yourself what you're seeking. Do you want clarity or mystery? Direction or reflection? The Waitesmith deck can guide like a well-lit path. The Marseille deck, that's the forest. No trail markers, just echoes. And yet, sometimes in that very silence, the magician speaks loudest, because in the absence of clear answers, the soul starts listening. And that silence, it's where alchemy begins to stir. Alchemical and mythological influences. Behind the tarot's vivid imagery lie ancient rivers, streams of myth, magic, and mystery that stretch back to Hermetic texts and whispered invocations in smoky temples. The magician, far from being a mere performer, is an echo of Hermes Trismegistus himself. Hermes wasn't just a messenger of the gods. He was the bridge between realms, the original alchemist, the translator of divine chaos into human meaning. That's the root of the magician's power. He mediates, not just performs. He connects the seen and unseen, the rational and the numinous. Alchemy, in this context, is not about turning lead into gold. It's about transformation of the psyche. The magician channels prima materia, that chaotic raw stuff of the unconscious, and uses it to craft something refined, a self. In mythology, this is mirrored by Mercurius, who appears as many forms, sometimes wise, sometimes wild. He represents the fluid nature of transformation, the need to dissolve before you can reconstruct. That's what individuation really is, psychological alchemy, breaking down to break through. Now picture this, you faced with a crisis or transition. The surface crumbles. What remains? That's your prima materia. That's where the magician steps in, not to fix, but to transmute. In those moments, you're not failing, you're fermenting. Artists know this well. Writers face blank pages. Sculptors confront raw stone. It's Rodin's hand of God, form emerging from formlessness. This is myth made real. Every act of honest creation is an invocation of the magician within. We also see this in spiritual traditions. In Egypt, Thoth, another hermetic figure, wrote the book of life and measured the soul. In India, Krishna speaks of illusion and action in the Bhagavad Gita. In these mythologies, the magician isn't just a character, he's a cosmic function. He reveals how divine principles express through matter. That's why the tarot carries such deep resonance. It compresses millennia of symbolic language into one image, one archetype. And when you see it, something ancient in you remembers. So when you draw the magician or meditate on his meaning, you're not just thinking, you're reactivating. You're entering a lineage of transformation stretching across cultures and centuries. That's the real magic, realizing you're not separate from these myths. You are the myth, living itself out through the mirror of your psyche. And just when you start seeing that clearly, something else begins to move beneath the surface, because the path of individuation is never just personal. It's cosmic. Jungian psychology and individuation. Carl Jung wasn't just analyzing dreams, he was mapping the soul. And in his psychological system, the magician finds his truest ground. He's not a stage performer here. He's the bridge between the ego and the unconscious, the guide who helps us walk the razor's edge between illusion and awakening. Individuation, Jung's central concept, is about becoming whole by integrating all parts of the psyche. The magician facilitates this not by force, but by showing through dreams, synchronicities, projections, what the ego refuses to see. The ego wants control, predictability, linear progress. But the magician? He dances with chaos. He understands that real transformation happens when we confront the unknown, when we meet the unconscious on its terms. That's why Jung spoke of active imagination and symbolic engagement, tools that bypass logic and speak directly to the inner self. The tarot works the same way. Pulling a card is never just pulling a card. It's an invitation to dialogue with the archetypes that already live inside you. Among these archetypes, the trickster plays a vital role. And yes, the magician carries a trace of him, he has to. He challenges your beliefs, pokes at your rigid structures, exposes where you're still pretending. He might even deceive you for your own good. That's uncomfortable, but necessary. Without that friction, no growth. The trickster isn't malicious, he's medicinal. Think of him as the mischievous teacher who doesn't give answers, only better questions. That's psychological gold. So how do you work with this energy consciously? Start by observing your projections, what triggers you in others. What qualities do you admire but feel aren't you? That's the magician pointing at shadow material, asking you to integrate. Try journaling, or better yet, working with symbols. Draw your emotions, create dream mandalas, or explore a tarot spread with your non-dominant hand. These practices bypass ego defense and invite the deeper self to speak. The goal isn't control, it's conversation. And when that conversation begins, something strange happens. You realize you're not just healing, you're becoming. You're watching the magician guide you through the labyrinth of your own unconscious, torch in hand. And right when you think you've got it figured out, he'll vanish and reappear as something else. Because individuation isn't a destination, it's a spiral, a dance. And if you listen closely, the next beat of that dance might already be echoing through your next shadow. Shadow and projection. Everyone wants to be the magician, but few want to meet his shadow. Yet that shadow is where the real work begins. Jung called it the dark side of the psyche, not evil, but repressed, rejected, unseen. The parts of us we've disowned, envy, rage, neediness, even brilliance, don't disappear. They go underground, and once hidden, they sneak into our lives through projection. We spot them in others, judging or admiring what we secretly deny in ourselves. That's not just psychology. That's the magician's sleight of hand, your own unconscious casting spells on your perception. Imagine this. You're triggered by someone's arrogance. It grates on you. But is it possible that somewhere in you, there's a voice that longs to be bold, confident, unapologetic? That discomfort might be a shadow knocking. Or maybe you idolize someone's creativity, but never dare to try creating yourself. That too is projection. Idealization is just the shadow in fancy clothes. The magician's shadow, in this sense, is like the devil card, power misused, energy unintegrated, creativity without conscience. That's why shadow work is so essential. It's not about getting rid of darkness, it's about reclaiming energy trapped in denial. The shadow isn't just trauma, it's potential. Your inner magician can only operate at full power when he's not afraid of what's behind the curtain. One powerful practice? Mirror journaling. Write about someone who triggers you, what they do, how they make you feel, and then ask, where does this live in me? It's raw, yes, but it's real. And realness is the foundation of all transformation. We often avoid this work because it threatens our ego's image of who we think we are. But the unconscious doesn't care about appearances. It wants wholeness. That's why people attract the same types of partners, repeat emotional patterns, or sabotage success, because the unacknowledged shadow is still running the show. The magician becomes a trickster here, not out of malice, but because he knows you'll never become whole while denying half of yourself. The chaos is the call. And when you finally answer that call, when you look at your fears, your patterns, your projections with honesty and compassion, you begin to shift. You start to integrate. And suddenly, that shadow isn't just a burden. It's a treasure chest, one you buried long ago and forgot the map. But the magician remembers. He's been waiting for you to look deeper. And once you do, you'll start noticing patterns in the strangest of places, leading you towards something oddly familiar, yet utterly mysterious. Synchronicity and archetypal activation. You ever think of someone and they suddenly text you? Or have a dream that unfolds in real life the next day? That's not just coincidence, it's synchronicity. Jung coined the term to describe meaningful coincidences that defy logic, but hit you right in the gut. These aren't random. They're the unconscious breaking through the surface, waving red flags, dropping breadcrumbs. And in those moments, the archetypes awaken. The fool might trip into your dream to stir your courage. The magician might echo through a song lyric that lands exactly when you need it. Synchronicity isn't about cause and effect, it's about meaning. Two events, seemingly unrelated, converge in significance. That's when the tarot lights up. You shuffle the deck, asking nothing in particular, and out comes the magician again. Third time this week. That's not luck. That's the archetype knocking. These moments ask you to pay attention, to step out of autopilot and notice the web of meaning that's constantly weaving itself around you. They're signals, not decorations. Think of it like this: reality has layers. There's the obvious, the literal. But beneath it, symbols move like currents under a calm sea. When an archetype activates, it rises through those layers, manifesting as an image, a person, a moment. It's why dreams feel prophetic, why some days feel enchanted. The psyche is trying to talk. Tarot, astrology, even repeating numbers, these are tools to tune in, not magical toys. The magic isn't in the tool. It's in your awareness of the dance. Want to work with synchronicity consciously? Start a synchronicity journal. Every time something weirdly meaningful happens, write it down. Over time, you'll see patterns. Maybe every time you feel stuck, you start seeing owls or hearing the same word. That's your psyche's language. Learn it, respect it, and the more you listen, the louder it speaks. Because archetypes want to be recognized. They're not passive, they're participants in your unfolding story, waiting to be seen. And once you start noticing these nudges, something opens. The veil thins. You start to sense a rhythm beneath your routines. The magician appears not with fireworks, but with a raised eyebrow and a knowing grin. He's already placed the signs. You just needed to look. And just as you do, your dreams might start to shift too, becoming more vivid, more direct, because what stirs during the day never sleeps at night. Inner work and the role of the inner magician. The greatest magic show isn't happening on stage, it's unfolding inside you. That quiet, invisible work of turning confusion into clarity, pain into insight, dreams into structure. That's the territory of the inner magician. He doesn't need applause, he's after alignment. While the outer world seduces with distractions and noise, the inner magician whispers through dreams, gut feelings, and sudden creative urges. He's subtle but powerful. And the more you engage with your unconscious, the louder his voice becomes. Doing inner work is like being both the sculptor and the stone. You face your raw material, emotions, memories, instincts, and shape it with honesty and patience. But here's the catch: you're not doing it alone. The inner magician is your silent partner, guiding the chisel. He speaks through synchronicities, through unexpected tarot pulls, through moments of déjà vu. And every time you pause to reflect, journal, or create from that space, you're entering sacred territory. That's not self-help. That's alchemy. Want to connect with him directly? Begin by honoring your dreams. Keep a notebook by your bed and write down even fragments. Over time, patterns emerge. Recurring images, characters, feelings, they're not random. They're symbolic messengers. The magician uses them to direct your awareness. Try asking a question before sleep and see what answers emerge. Then during the day, pull a card, not for prediction, but for dialogue. Ask, what do I need to see today that I'm ignoring? But don't stop there. Art, music, and movement are powerful portals. Even if you're not an artist, doodle your feelings, build a collage, write a letter from your shadow. These acts aren't childish, they're sacred. They bypass the intellect and speak in the language of the soul. The inner magician thrives on play, symbol, and ritual. Light a candle. Set an intention. Meditate with a crystal. It doesn't matter what tool you use, it matters that you mean it. Intention is his favorite ingredient. As you engage with this inner work, you might notice your outer life begin to shift, subtle at first, then unmistakable. People respond differently. Doors open. Old wounds loosen their grip. That's the mirror effect. What you transform within transforms without. And just as the path deepens, you may feel a strange new force rising, something imaginative, almost visionary. A call to not just work with symbols, but create them. And that call, it's where true magic starts to take form. Imagination and the power of creative visualization. Imagination isn't just for artists or dreamers, it's the psychic engine of creation. Jung called it the gateway to the unconscious, and the tarot knew this long before psychology caught up. The magician doesn't wait for reality to give him permission. He imagines, and then shapes the world around his vision. Visualization isn't just thinking nice thoughts. It's focused energy, directed will, symbolic resonance, all working together to mold reality. That's how spiritual growth becomes tangible. The mind imagines and the soul responds. Think about athletes who visualize the perfect shot before they take it, or performers who rehearse their routine mentally, down to the last detail. Their brains light up as if it's really happening. That's not magic, it's neurobiology syncing with metaphysics. The magician inside you knows this. When you imagine with clarity and emotion, you're not escaping reality, you're preparing it. And the unconscious, always listening, begins shifting your perception to align with that image. Start small. Close your eyes and imagine a version of you that speaks with confidence, that walks into a room and owns it, not arrogantly, but with quiet presence. Visualize how you feel, how you move, what you wear. Do it daily. Over time, your psyche begins integrating this image. You'll start making different choices. You'll act before you overthink. That's the magician at work, not fixing you, but revealing the version of you that was buried beneath old scripts and stale beliefs. This is why imagination is so dangerous to systems of control. When people begin to envision new ways of being, more free, more connected, more authentic, reality has no choice but to bend. That's the subversive power of myth, art, and symbol. They bypass dogma and plug straight into the soul. Tarot cards ignite this process, especially when approached as mirrors, not oracles. They help you visualize inner truths before the outer world confirms them. First you see it, then you become it. And once that process begins, the urge to express gets louder. You don't just want to imagine change, you want to build it, share it, embody it. You feel the pull to write, to dance, to speak, to shape the world with intention. And in those moments, you're no longer waiting for magic. You are the magic, which means the next time you picture your future, it might not just be fantasy, it might be prophecy waiting to be claimed. Cautions against spiritual inflation and misuse of magic. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Not all magic is healthy, and not every magician is wise. When spiritual insight inflates the ego instead of dissolving it, we're no longer dealing with transformation. We're dealing with delusion. This is what Jung called spiritual inflation, and it's sneaky. It happens when someone taps into the unconscious, tastes a bit of archetypal power, and suddenly believes they're enlightened, chosen, or above others. That's not awakening. That's ego in costume. The magician, when distorted, becomes the manipulator. He knows the rules of perception, but instead of healing, he deceives. That energy can show up in gurus who abuse their influence, or manifestation coaches who promise miracles for money. But let's be honest, it can show up in us too. Anytime we use spiritual language to avoid accountability, or treat insight as a badge of superiority, we're slipping into illusion. Magic without humility becomes a trap, not a tool. So how do we stay grounded? Through shadow work, self-inquiry, and honest community. Ask yourself, am I using this knowledge to connect or to separate, to grow or to dominate? The magician must always stay in relationship with the fool, that part of us that remembers we don't know it all and never will. It's okay to be powerful, but the moment you start thinking you're the only one who gets it, it's time to go back to the basics: silence, humility, presence. One practical way to stay centered is to build rituals that serve, not glorify. Light candles not to show off on Instagram, but to set intention. Share your insights not to impress, but to inspire. Keep a journal of your magical experiments, not to prove anything, but to stay honest with yourself. The magician matures not through power, but through integrity. He knows that what he channels isn't his. It flows through, not from. That awareness keeps the magic clean. And if you've ever been burned by someone using spirituality as control, you're not alone. That wound is real. But don't let it close your heart. Let it sharpen your discernment. Because the true magician doesn't need to dominate a room. His power speaks quietly, like still water shaping stone. And just when you think you've figured it all out, the inner work will humble you again, asking not what you know, but how deeply you're willing to serve what's true. Art, alchemy, and the creative process. Creation isn't just expression, it's transmutation. Every artist, whether they realize it or not, is practicing alchemy. They take the raw, the chaotic, the unspeakable, and give it form. The sculptor sees the figure inside the stone. The writer wrestles emotions into words. The dancer turns inner tension into movement. This is where the magician comes alive, not on a stage, but in the studio, the sketchbook, the blank canvas of the soul. He brings form from formlessness, just like Rodin's hand of God reaching into clay. Alchemy was never really about turning lead into gold. It was about turning the self into something luminous. The lead was the unconscious. The gold was integrated consciousness. The magician stands at the center of that process, holding the tools, channeling the elements. And when he acts, it's not frantic, it's intentional. He knows that a single line, a single color choice, a single phrase can shift perception. That's not decoration. That's revelation. Art done right changes the one who creates it. The creative process also mirrors the stages of alchemy: nigredo, chaos, confusion; albedo, clarity emerging; citronitas, illumination; and rubedo, integration. Anyone who's ever made something meaningful knows this path. You start with an idea, you get lost in the mess, and if you persist, something unexpected and beautiful emerges. That's the magician at work, making order from inner chaos, not by force, but through surrender. Letting the material speak back, letting the soul take the lead. Want to activate this in your own life? You don't need to be an artist. You need to listen. Sit with a blank page and let your hand move. Take a walk with a question in your heart and notice what nature answers. Build something with your hands, wood, clay, collage. Don't aim to impress. Aim to express. The process is the product, and through it, the unconscious speaks in color, shape, sound. It's sacred, even when it's messy. Especially when it's messy. And once you start creating like this, something awakens. You don't just make art, you become the art. Life itself begins to feel more fluid, more responsive. Symbols jump out of books. Dreams carry new weight. The magician stands beside you, smiling, not because you've mastered the craft, but because you've finally surrendered to the mystery of creation. And just as the last stroke lands on the canvas, a strange scientific truth begins to echo behind it. Scientific parallels and the creation of reality. In the world of science, particularly in quantum physics, we find striking parallels to the principles of magic. The idea that perception creates reality isn't just a mystical concept, it's at the heart of modern physics. Wave-particle duality, for instance, shows us that light behaves as both a wave and a particle, depending on how it's observed. This aligns perfectly with the magician's role in shaping perception. Reality isn't fixed, it's fluid, waiting for our attention to define it. And in the same way, the magician uses the power of focused will to transform potential into form. The observer effect is another powerful parallel. In quantum mechanics, particles behave differently when observed. The act of observation changes the outcome. Similarly, the magician doesn't simply interact with the world. He shapes it through his focused perception. It's no coincidence that both the tarot and quantum physics point to the same truth. Consciousness is a co-creator of reality. Whether through the ancient symbols of tarot or the latest scientific experiments, we're learning the same thing. We are active participants in the unfolding of existence. Consider the notion of energy fields. Everything in the universe vibrates at a frequency, and so do our thoughts, emotions, and actions. In the magician's world, he knows how to tune into these frequencies, shaping the energies around him to manifest his intentions. Just like a tuning fork, the magician's focused attention alters the vibrational state of his environment. Science is starting to show us what mystics have known for centuries. Energy is the fundamental building block of reality, and we, as conscious beings, are its sculptors. But science also cautions us. Perception is not infallible. Our senses are limited, our understanding constrained by the laws of physics. What we see is not the full picture. That's why the magician must work with both science and intuition. He understands that the visible world is only one layer. Just like scientists who use tools to extend their perception, microscopes, telescopes, particle accelerators, the magician uses tools of the psyche, symbols, rituals, intuition, and awareness to see beyond the surface. So, how do you apply this in daily life? Start with your awareness of energy and perception. Notice how your thoughts influence your surroundings, how a shift in mindset can change your day. Practice visualization, not as a fantasy, but as a way to bring unseen possibilities into form. And remember, as science continues to reveal, the magician's art is not just a myth. It's the fundamental dance of creation, a dance where the observer doesn't just watch. They shape the rhythm, the movement, and the result. Dreams and the language of the unconscious. Dreams are not distractions. They are letters from the unconscious, written in a language older than words. Every symbol, every strange twist of logic, every surreal landscape holds meaning. Jung saw dreams as direct expressions of the psyche, raw, unfiltered, and wise. And the magician? He's the one who teaches us to read those messages. He's the translator between your waking self and the dreamer within, reminding you that the things you can't explain often explain you the most. When you dream of flying, falling, being chased, or finding keys, you're not just processing daily leftovers. You're exploring archetypal terrain. The fool might show up as a child jumping off a cliff. The magician might appear as a teacher, a stranger with tools, or a voice that shifts reality. These are not random cameos. They are energies seeking integration. And the more you pay attention to them, the more precise they become. The unconscious rewards awareness with clarity. Start with a simple ritual. Keep a dream journal beside your bed. As soon as you wake, jot down whatever you remember, images, emotions, fragments. Don't judge, don't interpret immediately. Just collect. Over time, you'll see symbols repeating. You'll notice emotional patterns. You might even start dreaming of solutions before problems arise. That's not fantasy. That's the magician using your dream world to whisper truths you weren't ready to face in daylight. Dream work isn't sleep, it's soul work. Tarot can deepen this process. Try pulling a card each morning and comparing it to your dreams. The connections may shock you. A card like the Magician might reflect a dream where you finally take control. The Devil might echo a nightmare rooted in shadow. These pairings are bridges between realms, guiding your conscious mind into partnership with the unconscious. This isn't just reflection, it's revelation. You begin to see how your inner world constructs your outer narrative. And once you establish this inner dialogue, something shifts. You stop fearing your emotions. You stop ignoring your symbols. The dream space becomes a sacred classroom. And right when you think it's just you and your mind in the dark, something divine begins to emerge, an intelligence not born of thought, but of vision. And that intelligence? It's been there all along, waiting for the right moment to unite what's above with what lies below. The Magician as a bridge between dualities. At the heart of the Magician's power lies his greatest secret. He doesn't pick sides, he unites them. He's not just the master of symbols or tools. He's the bridge between opposites. Masculine and feminine, light and shadow, spirit and matter. He holds the tension between all things and turns it into transformation. This is why his posture often shows one hand pointing to the heavens, the other to the earth. He lives the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. He doesn't choose one or the other, he embodies both. Duality exists everywhere, day and night, joy and grief, order and chaos. But the Magician doesn't see these as enemies. He knows they're two expressions of the same energy. Just as yin needs yang, the sacred needs the profane to exist. This understanding isn't abstract, it's practical. In daily life, it's the ability to hold space for anger and compassion, to be strong and vulnerable, to lead and surrender. That's real mastery. That's where magic becomes integration. Look at artists, leaders, healers who inspire you most. They usually hold both fire and softness. They're not perfect, but they're whole. That's the Magician archetype fully embodied. He doesn't run from complexity. He creates through it. He knows that reconciling opposites generates power. Think of the alchemical wedding, the union of king and queen, sun and moon. These myths aren't stories, they're inner blueprints. And the Magician is their living expression. Want to activate this in yourself? Start by noticing where you split things, where you say, I'm logical, not emotional, or I'm creative, not practical. Those divisions are illusions. You're both. You always were. Practice holding polarities without collapsing into one side. Try meditating on symbols like the lemniscate or the yin-yang. Pull tarot spreads that explore inner conflict, not just answers. Ask your inner Magician to reveal where you're fragmenting and to show you how to weave wholeness. And when you begin to live from this place, where opposites dance instead of war, life takes on a new texture. You stop chasing the right path and start weaving your own. You become less reactive, more creative. The Magician becomes less a figure you study and more a presence you are. And just as you reach this new balance, a deeper question will rise, one not just about you, but about all of us and the collective future we're shaping together. The role of the Magician in collective human destiny. The Magician isn't just an inner force. He's a collective archetype awakening across humanity. In times of crisis, social, ecological, spiritual, it's the Magician that rises from the depths to ask, what can we create now? Not just for survival, but for transformation. The same energy that guides personal evolution begins to ripple through cultures. And right now, that ripple is becoming a wave. Our collective psyche is stirring, and with it, the responsibility to wield our symbolic, energetic, and imaginative powers wisely. We're living in a time of collapse and convergence, old systems breaking down, new paradigms emerging. In this liminal space, the Magician calls us to stop outsourcing our power. He challenges us to become conscious participants in reality itself. Whether through innovation, activism, art, or healing, we're being asked to shape the future, not just inherit it. This is no longer about me and my healing journey. It's about how that inner work ripples out into the we, into a new kind of planetary consciousness. The shadow of the collective magician is also rising, conspiracy without clarity, technology without ethics, spiritual bypassing dressed as enlightenment. We see the tools of magic, narrative, symbol, emotion, used to manipulate as often as to inspire. That's why awareness is everything. The magician doesn't just ask what's possible, he asks what's true. And truth, in this age, is a revolutionary act, especially when it's grounded in compassion, wisdom, and vision. Want to step into this consciously? Start by aligning your inner work with outer action. Let your healing inform how you show up in relationships, in your community, and how you vote, consume, create. Ask yourself not just what you can manifest, but what you can embody. What kind of world you want to midwife into being. The magician's power isn't flashy. It's generative. It builds, nurtures, inspires. And when many people awaken to that force at once, movements are born. So here we are, standing at the edge of an old world, with the tools of creation in our hands. The fool is ready to leap. The magician is ready to guide. And somewhere, just beyond the veil, destiny waits, not as something fixed, but as something we shape together. And as that veil thins, what rises to meet us may not be a prophecy, but a mirror.